Welcome everyone to episode 15 of When Tomorrow Comes. Nice to see you all. Joined this week by Philippa Curran and Nick Ireland. Hi guys, nice to see you.
Hiya.
Hi Nick, and we've also got Ashley, my usual store on When Tomorrow Comes. Hi Ashley, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Ian?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. Philippa, I'm going to let you lead by just give us a quick overview of your article that you've written for us this week, and then we'll kick off from there. So if you want to just give us a quick overview of the point you were making.
Sure. Yeah. So we were sent by a client, actually, some research by the Centre for Progressive Policy that had looked in some detail into the differences across the country of the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. And it showed that the decline in certain areas was close to 50% worse than in other areas. So we've been chatting about that obviously internally, and we think obviously it shows the importance of having that place-based approach to the response and the need for local authorities to have the power to enact the best decision making for them at a local level, and also to be able to do that quickly, so in the short term. So we've all been involved in, area action plans and things like that, sort of 10, 15 years length of time. We need to obviously move much more quickly now, and to have a short-term action plan that's in place with funding behind it that supports local decision making and allows people to get on with the change that's needed. And we certainly feel in working with the local authority that we are, that's predicted to be one of the worst hit, that is what would have most at the moment, and also in talking to businesses.
And I think in the article you're talking about the fact that areas in the north have been more widely hit than areas in the south. But I'm guessing, Nick, that could be just as much about the economic circumstances of local areas. So an area that depends on an aviation, for example, could be worse hit because of that. Presumably, it's not just the north-south divide issue.
I think it's going to be quite locally specific, depending on sort of the nature and structure of different economies. So if you've got a high dependence on tourism, that's something that's going to have been affected quite significantly in recent months, but might well have a good couple of months coming forwards as people don't go abroad. Through to the aviation sector is clearly one that's been significantly affected, and so that affects areas like airports, Crawley, around Heathrow, around other airports in the country, but equally areas which manufacture significantly involved in aviation, the aviation sector from the manufacturing side. So Derby, where Rolls-Royce is, Coventry, and so forth.
Philippa, whilst I was sort of preparing for this episode, I was just flicking through my quarterly update from the RSA Journal, and there was an article in there talking about how 18% of people in the country think that we've got the balance between local and national government about right, that the obvious inference being that we haven't got it right. And I wonder, notwithstanding the point you make, just how able are local authorities to respond to these challenges if they've got such a relatively small overview and such a small recourse to the national purse from the money that's generated in their local areas to actually do something about this?
Yeah, I think that obviously it's about collaboration. So it's not about the local authority just, moving forward with everything and trying to resolve it. It's absolutely about collaboration, and particularly on the big issues of climate change and homelessness. Nick and I are working with a registered provider really closely on homelessness, which is a massive, education for us as well in terms of understanding the complexities there. But I think the two-tier government system is actually unhelpful in places in terms of decision making, and that's not what's needed at the moment. What's needed is action, and quickly, and the powers to be able to do that. And I do think local authorities have shown with what they've done over the past few months that they are moving ahead, and they do know their communities. They're trying to work really closely with them, and they can come up with some really good solutions.
And you talk in the article, I know you didn't probably want to be specific in naming a particular authority, but you do talk in your article about the fact you're working with an authority in the Midlands. Could you give us a bit more of a sense of what people are doing on the ground?
Yeah, so absolutely. So that in that instance, the council and partners at a regional level have got a big objective to move into a certain area of industry, and they've been doing that successfully. But in terms of COVID, what's happened is some of those local businesses on the high street have actually started to enact some of what regionally we've been trying to do for a long time there, in terms of becoming a regional base for food and drink. So they've started to work better together to set up things, to start to use social media to advertise them. So it shows that actually some good hopefully can come out of this, and potentially some of the objectives that you know, local authorities and regional partners who are providing lots of the funding on the ground, some of these objectives can actually be met now more quickly. But obviously it's all a balance, and you know, the recent announcement from the government obviously in terms of funding is helpful to a certain extent as well.
Ashley, did you want to come in with any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think it was a really interesting article that Philip had produced, and I think one of the points that I thought was interesting was about how people we see the best in people after a sort of crisis or something like that. And I just think it's interesting, and you know, that lots of businesses will be having to innovate and be trying to, you know, use their businesses and their units that they've got slightly differently. Philip has already touched on the fact that, you know, we're going to have to look at local areas and really understand the needs that they have, and you know, use our kind of planning knowledge and expertise and placemaking as well to ensure that what we're planning for in the future, that there is sort of economic resilience there, acknowledging the changing practices that businesses might be, you know, considering, and also kind of other issues that COVID has flagged. So I think that, yeah, Philip is right that you need action from sort of the government on this, and addressing the different sort of ways that different areas are dealing with it. But at the same time, we need to look to the local areas and ensure that when we are planning for this and we are sort of putting forward development proposals, that we take on board that they have very niche requirements, and that people will be diversifying the way that they bring things forward, because I think it's a very changing picture, and we don't know exactly what the long-term impact of this is going to be.
We saw yesterday Boris's response, you know, with his with the photo opportunity of driving a hydrogen powered JCB, and obviously the build slogan that came out. How much is this about government leading and communities, local authorities following, or is it alternatively about a patchwork of local led initiatives, in your opinion?
I think probably the scale of the challenge means we need to do both. We need a range of locally led initiatives. You know, many businesses are innovating themselves to respond to the crisis, and are having to do that. Local grants that can be made available can help that. But equally, there is also quite a key role for that larger scale coordinated infrastructure investment that's best driven from a sort of a government or a sub-regional level. And that's physical infrastructure, houses, roads, railways, and so forth, which the government's talking about. I think it also needs to look at skills, and there's a good opportunity now, as the labour market's changing, to upskill people, to enable them to look at new roles in the future.
And Philippa, it's no coincidence that Boris was filmed in a newly won constituency for the government. I mean, politics is never far away from decision making, is it?
No, it isn't. And you can recognise obviously the national economy and measurement of GDP, but that's all abstract, I think, is what we're sort of trying to put out in the article. I think without that local drill down, you absolutely need to have that, especially as things need to be done so quickly. I mean, I don't want to bring up Brexit, but if we don't get some recovery before, we start to look to that as well. That's why I think, it just needs to happen so quickly. Like talking to some of those businesses, at the point there's any announcement on some of those things that are going to affect them, before anything has even been put in place, the cost of some of their supply chains will double. It will double based on one announcement that will come out. So it's so sensitive, and so that local drill down, I just think is all important, especially when cash is so scarce, really.
This is a tough question, which is why I'll put it to Ashley, because then if it's the wrong answer, she gets the blame rather than anyone else. But Ashley, are local authorities structured in the right way with that leadership? I mean, do we need to, you know, I know it's difficult in these times, but would we see greater coordination and leadership if we, for example, had more elected mayors? Or do you think there are other ways of trying to provide that coordinated approach at a local level?
I think it is a very difficult question, and I think obviously there are going to be different solutions for different areas. So I think that mayors can work for areas where there are a lot of wider spatial considerations and a big variety of different sort of settlements in areas that have very different economic needs, and you need someone to have that sort of coordinated oversight. But in other instances where you've got kind of smaller, kind of tighter knit authorities, really you want there to be a very, very local focus, and for things to be kind of you know, coordinated in a sense that makes sense to that particular area. I don't think there's kind of a one size fits all approach, but it needs to be acknowledged that local authorities you know, need to be aware that there is a kind of an economic impact of what's happening right now, and that they probably need to start thinking, if they haven't already, about very, very long-term impacts of this. It's not just, there's not going to be a quick fix solution, and they're all going to have to find different solutions to their particular circumstances. I don't really know if that answers the question, but it is a difficult one, and I'm certainly not best placed to advise on how best to do it.
I suppose the danger is, if you take a national approach, Philippa, is that we just rip up the planning system and we go to, you know, decisions that we've seen on things like PD rights. But that's probably an article for another time. But as we're drawing to a close, Philippa, did you want to just give us your sort of concluding thoughts on what we should perhaps be looking out for, you know, any sort of wish list that you have?
I think I mean, it sounds corny, but it is all about partnership working, and I've seen instances where that's happened more naturally now, where the public and private sector are working together better because we're in this crisis. And I think more of that needs to happen, and this needs to be, you know, a watershed moment around that, I think, and that local drill down really, I think, is the main point, and action quickly, which all sounds really easy, and obviously it's not, but yeah.
Good stuff. Nick, thanks. Anything you want to add before we close?
I think just, I suppose, something quickly on housing. You know, housing is important because it can be a local economic driver in its own right, I think. And there are some direct things that individual councils can do working with key development schemes in their area. You know, they would be able to, and there's instances from the last recession of councils essentially working with smaller schemes to guarantee sales, to get sites going. In the instances where people hold them back, and I think that there's therefore, you know, not just the sort of the national level program that the government is looking at, but there are individual things that individual councils can do as well. And I think, you know, given the scale of the problems that we might have in the coming months and years, you know, everybody needs to get involved.
Good stuff. That's a good point to leave on. Guys, thanks very much for joining us. Philippa, thanks for writing the article and provoking this episode. Much appreciated. Thanks everyone for your contributions, and thanks for watching.
Thank you.